This show is based on Lakota Star Knowledge, which is about living in peace and looking at life as having three perspectives, and looking at these perspectives and saying, what can we learn from them? And where we get in trouble is when we look at these three perspectives and say, which one is the good one? And then we choose one of them and reject the others. And so what's happening here is duality. In duality, a person only comprehends 33% of everything, because he only accepts one of at least three perspectives, and that's where all the problems of the world basically come from. Racism, ethnocentrism, paternalism, and dogma, good versus evil, that all comes from duality. That violates natural law. Natural law says there's at least three perspectives, and it's about what can I learn from them. This is a really, really old perspective. This perspective is several million years old. This is the way the original humans were, our ancestors. They didn't see each other as skin color because they were communicating from within themselves. See, when you live this way, what you're doing is you're taking care of yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And these four parts are the four parts of yourself. And they're connected deep within you. And that's your sacred area. That's your sacred center. So when you live this way, you establish peace inside of yourself. And when you communicate, you're communicating from that sacred center. So you're not communicating as a Lakota or as a Japanese, or you're communicating as a human being. And this is where we are connected to the earth, because the earth sees us as her grandchildren. She doesn't favor anybody. There is no chosen race. There is no cursed race, because there's religions that believe these things. And that's because they're communicating outside of that sacred circle. I just explained to you a few minutes ago what duality is. When you live a dualistic life, you're communicating outside that circle. And that's why people separate themselves from others they disagree with, and they say to these other people, you're wrong, and I will show you you're wrong. I will prove to you you're wrong, because I'm smarter than you, I'm better than you, and I know what's right for you. My way is the only way to do something. And see, this is where all this trouble comes from. And so that's communicating from your skin color, your religion, your secret society, whatever it is. This is duality, because your communication is unhealthy and it doesn't have healthy power, because you're out to oppress others that are different than you, or you stay away from them and just don't want to have anything to do with them. And people who are this way are also racist too, they're the same way. It's just that they don't oppress. They're more like victims. A lot of problems come from that. And as such, dualistic people reject people who follow after Lakota Star Knowledge ways of learning. And from Lakota Star Knowledge, we see duality as a difficulty. And how we see that is looking at it, learning it, and see how it works, and make it work for us. We learn from it, and whatever emotions came with that, those emotions leave, they give you peace, you become emotionally developed, that helps you develop spiritually, mentally, and it affects your physical health in a good way. So you have to take care of all four parts though too, though. You got to go out there, eat right, exercise, and you don't have to be gung-ho about it, but to be sensible, eat sensibly, go out there and move your body around, dance, do Zumba, or all kinds of things like that. So in duality, people only accept 33% of reality. That means when they have difficulties, they don't completely process the emotions. So most of the emotions are still trapped inside of them. So what happens is they end up not knowing themselves. Because when you have peace, you know yourself. You've taken that time to do that. In Lakota Star Knowledge, you've taken the time to know yourself, to establish the peace, And so when you experience anything new for the first time, you take the time to check it out. When it's a totally new experience and you just have no clue what's going on, that you have to check it out and then learn from it. And then now you have the knowledge. In duality, they don't do that because they don't know themselves. Too many emotions are trapped inside of them. They can't have peace. This results in them not knowing themselves, and this is why they're so judgmental. And anything they don't like, anything they disagree with, they judge it right away without even taking the time to check it out completely. They just hear a few things, and then they totally throw it out. Call it bad, call it evil, stupid, or whatever. That is duality. They don't develop spiritually because they don't develop emotionally. Instead, they develop inferiority complexes and low self-esteem and low self-worth. That is duality. That is unhealthy living. Our ancestors called each other Ikce Oyate. They didn't say, oh, there's the red people, there's the yellow people, there's the white people, and there's the black people. They didn't say that. Doesn't even have that. Yeah, red people would be Oyate Luta. That doesn't exist in any Lakota Star Knowledge stories whatsoever. It says Ikce Oyate, human being, common people. Lakota people is our tribal, cultural identity. But that's not the important one. The important one is underneath, because underneath is where you connect to the Grandmother Earth, where your sacred center is. That's where you're a human being. That's Ikce. This is how our ancestors were. They were Ikce Oyate before they were Lakota, because the Lakota didn't even exist yet. That comes much, much later. That comes with the ceremonies, and the ceremonies are not even 2,000 years old. Even the white buffalo calf pipe is not even 600 years old. That's recent when you're talking about how old the earth is. So when I say ancestors, I'm going millions of years ago when there were no ceremonies, there were no sacred items. It was just a way to live with nature. That's the basis. And then they're aware of the natural laws. Like attracts like. You attract what you are what you attract. This word mitakwe oyasing. Through the Lakota perspective, we all are created from the same original 4 elements in the universe. And that makes us all relatives. That's why we choose this word, otakuye, which means relations, relatives. And we say mitakuye, meaning my relatives. And then we say oyasin, that means all. So when we're saying that, it's not just saying, oh, hi, cousin tree. You know, you can talk like that if you want to. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean that because we come from the same 4 basic elements and we're just organized differently, that makes us relatives. But it is saying we're connected to each other. But it begins within you. Inside of you is a universe. Yeah, everything is connected inside of you, just like you are connected to everything around you. This is the Lakota Star Knowledge definition of mitakwe oyasing. In Lakota, we have this concept of the medicine wheel, and it has 4 parts. Star Knowledge order of the colors is the black is at the west, white is at the north, yellow is at the east, and red is in the south. This comes from the Lakota Star Knowledge version of the creation story. And the direction west is the first direction that was created, then north, then east, then south. But these 4 colors, they just represent those directions. That's all they represent. They don't represent races of people. It says nothing about skin color. So when it's talking about the red road, yeah, Changuluta, this is actually the road to life. Red does not represent Indians. It represents life. In the beginning of the creation of our Grandmother Earth, lava was flowing. This was her blood. Some people say it's the water. No, it's not. It's the lava. Yeah, this is her blood. It was all over in her creation. And our blood is red. Lava is lots of plants also have red blood. Animals have red blood. This is life. Red does not symbolize Indians. It symbolizes life. So the medicine wheel does not represent races of people. And in fact, when you get serious about it, Lakota Star Knowledge says that humans appeared on this earth in 5 areas around the same time. And when they intermingled with each other, they didn't call each other by skin color. So whenever you hear an Indian say that the 4 colors of the medicine will represent races of people, this is wrong. This is dualistic because it's separating people from each other. The idea that when people say that these colors represent races, this is also saying that these races should stay apart from each other. And that violates Mitakwe Oyasi, which means everything is connected within us, just like we are connected to everything around us. It always begins within. Within is no skin color. Within is no culture. Within is no language. Within is a holy area inside of us where our bodies, our minds, our emotions, and our soul all connect to each other. So when we take care of those 4 parts, we have peace within. And since reality begins within, now we can be at peace with everything around us. This is Mitakwe Oyasi. In this old Lakota Star Knowledge story called When the Moon Cried, we get the male cycle, which a lot of people don't know about, and we get a female cycle, which of course everybody knows about. Female cycles monthly, and in Western world just associates that with menstruation. But in the Lakota world, there's more to it than just menstruation. It is a sacred time. There's other things going on. Because of the incidents that happened in the story, women receive 3 more stages of development. In the beginning, both men and women had 4 stages of development. But in this story explains a certain incident that happened in the stars, and the result was women gained 3 more stages of development. Things happen inside their body that are something like ceremonies. And they have a certain connection to the moon and the earth. And at the same time, something also happened to the man. Instead of getting 3 more stages of development, he has to do certain things. So for the woman, these things are internal. For the man, they're external. So in other words, these sacred things that are happening inside the woman, a man, to balance that out, has to do certain things outside of himself. These are ceremonies too. And the man's connection is to the sun and to the sky, whereas the woman's is to the earth and to the moon. So, these 2 cycles, the male and female cycle, it's saying that neither one is more important than the other, but they work together. They complement one another. But neither one is more important than the other. So this is why we are neither matriarchal or patriarchal. We're neither one of those. We're something different. That's ancient society. Of course, now people say that we are matriarchal, but that's false. This is absolutely false. We're neither one. So, because of this incident, this affected our language too. And so from that point on, women started to end their sentences one way, and men ended theirs another way. It's because of this story. However, there are exceptions. Sometimes you have a woman who's born with the mind of a man, and vice versa. Sometimes you have a male who has the mind of a female. They're sacred words for these people. Today they call them, in the Western world, they're called transgen. But back then, they're accepted. Remember, Lakota Star Knowledge says that reality begins within. So if your mind is female. That's what you are. Doesn't matter what body you have. So that person will dress like a woman if it's a boy. If it's a girl and she's one of these people, she's going to dress like a boy. And they're going to be accepted as such because the people are taught that reality begins within. So this is how that happens. So you see, there's exceptions. Now that's just 2 examples of more. There's other exceptions too. There's 7 genders. People think there's only 2. There's actually 7. So because of these exceptions, our language is this way, our culture is this way. There's more than one way to do certain ceremonies. So yeah, there's going to be exceptions to the rules. This is because we are not dogmatic. Back in the late 1800s, when we were placed on reservations, there were prison camps in the beginning. And this is a situation where we couldn't leave. We were not allowed to hunt. Our knives and guns were taken from us. And we were only allowed to eat whatever the American government gave to us, which was really no good food. The quality of the food was okay when it left places like Chicago and stuff like that. But once it got to some of these train stations between there and the reservation, a lot of these handlers would sell it. And then they would buy old food and put that in there instead, and these middlemen would make a lot of money. So what we got on a reservation was bullshit food. It was really no good. And we ended up getting all kinds of diseases like heart diseases, hypertension, diabetes, things like that. And then at the same time, our language and ceremonies were declared illegal by the United States. So we were hit physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Soon after that, our minds became weak. These are the 4 parts of the self. So with the 4 parts of the self being sick, we lost our connection to our sacred center. So we started to focus on communicating away from that. And then the priests came from the various churches, and they learned our ways and said that since our ways conflict with the Bible, that our ways are evil, that they come from Satan. They come from the devil. So in our weakened states, we slowly began to accept that. Now, another thing is that there were some Lakota people that didn't want to accept that. They wanted to hang on to the traditional Lakota star knowledge ways. And if they revolted, they were sent to a mental hospital in Canton, South Dakota, which was set up for all reluctant Indians in America that did not want to become Christianized. They were sent there. And these church priests also committed the medicine men, medicine women, holy men, holy women. They committed all of them to these mental asylums too. This way, the people would not go to them for help, that they would come to the churches. They wanted the Indian people to only go to the priests and not their traditional healers. So they sent the healers to this mental asylum to die. And if you are radical, you were sent there to die too. So while this is happening, the priests are saying to Indian people, if you believe our way, we will help your children. And so it was a very, very dire straits time. And so a lot of Indians became Christians because of that. Like I said, we were weak-minded too at that point. And those who stuck it out, there were people who refused to accept Christianity, but they went to church anyway. What they were doing was they were putting up a candy store front. On the outside, they were acting like good little Christian Indians, but on the inside they weren't. They were star knowledge people. They did this because they didn't want to get sent to that mental asylum to die. That's sad, isn't it? But that's part of what happened back then. And it's because of these people who maintained this knowledge in secret. Thanks to them, they passed it down to certain people, like me, and we still have this knowledge. And I'm sharing it with you. Because this regards the sacred center. And we all have that. This is not a Lakota thing. This is a Ikce Oyate thing. Ikce Oyate means human being. When you live this way, you communicate as a human, not as a Lakota, not as a German, or a Japanese, or an African. You communicate as a human. That's really important to know. So, that's how it was back then. Now remember I said that the priest said to the Indians, we will help your children. So, they took the children away from the parents, sent them to boarding school hundreds of miles away, where these children were tortured to speak only English and learn the civilized Christian way. If they spoke about home, they were tortured. These schools didn't do background checks in those days. The pay was really low. So they got really no good teachers in these schools. A lot of these teachers were sadistic. They got sexual pleasure from torturing people. And here, this is like summer holiday camp for them. And the same thing for perverts. A lot of perverts now had their pick of the litter. And they could get away with it. That's what happened. A lot of these children were murdered. They were killed. They were raped. They were molested. And there's a lot of unmarked graves near these schools. Not all these children are accounted for. So, those who made it through, what they learned was whatever they saw. Because a lot of these children never went back home. They were told by the priests that their families had died and that there was nobody there. And that broke their hearts. This is why some of these children, they were so sad they couldn't eat. And they ended up starving themselves to death. And those who made it through, like I said, they didn't really survive because they were not able to process all these emotional traumas that they experienced. They didn't know how, because the only adults that were around them were these unhealthy, abusive people, teachers, dorm matrons, cooks, janitors, priests. They were all unhealthy to them. That's all they knew. They learned how to become victims, and they learned how to become abusers to those who they considered weaker than themselves. So they didn't really survive. A lot of these children that made it through these schools, they had a lot of traumas that they didn't know how to deal with, because all they saw was abuse. That's what they learned. There was no adult healthy role models to emulate. And remember I said these children were told that their families were all dead, so they didn't go back during summer holiday. They just stayed at these schools and worked. So when they left these schools, they tried to live in mainstream America. Nobody accepted them. They would say, you're a heathen. You're a dirty Indian. So they couldn't even get jobs off the reservation. And when they went back to the reservation, to their people, they ran into more problems. Many, many times they were not even accepted by their own people, because their own people were saying, you're too white. You act like a white man. So they're caught in between. So a lot of them turn to alcohol to try to hide all of it, to try to forget everything. They turn to alcohol and then later drugs. There were some who tried to make it. They married each other because they knew each other went through the same thing. And they didn't want their children to go through what they went through. So they didn't teach them the language. They didn't teach them the culture. Those children, the children of these first generation boarding school people, those children are today's elders. When they were born, they didn't learn the language. They didn't learn Lakota Star knowledge. They never got the opportunity to. When you look at an old person on the reservation today, they're not the connection to the ancient past. No, they were born in a Christian background at a time when the reservations were strongly Christian. So this is what happened. That's a native experience that a lot of people don't realize. This is what happened all over America and Canada too. So the next generation, they are sent to boarding school too. No choice. It's a little bit better, but they're still abused. They're still getting treated really no good. And so they grow up, have children, and they don't teach their children anything. What can they teach them? They don't know anything concerning their own language. This is why today most people cannot speak their own language, and what little cultural information they know is Christianized, meaning it's dualistic, and it's not the original ancient form. Okay, so the first generation of Indian kids that were sent to boarding school, since all around them were unhealthy adults who did nothing but abuse them, they didn't receive healthy parenting. They missed things that they should have learned about life. So they're lacking emotional development. So when they grow up, and those who make it through these boarding schools and then they have children, those children are also lacking that emotional support, that emotional development, because the parents don't know how to do it. All they knew and all they learned was abuse. All they experienced in these schools was abuse. So they have a hard time trying to be a healthy parent. So they do the best that they can. But the children still are not receiving the proper emotional development, the experiences that healthy children should receive from healthy parents. They're still missing that. And so when that second generation grows up, they know even less concerning healthy parenting. And so their children receive even less. And every time this happens, the next generation becomes more dualistic than the previous one. So let me try to say that again. The first generation boarding school kids, they didn't receive proper parenting skills. So when they have children, their children are not receiving healthy training that they should be receiving. They're receiving even less than their parents. Now that second generation, when they grow up, see, they know even less. So when they have children, those children are receiving even less, and it gets worse with each generation, which also means that the less healthy emotional development they receive, the more dualistic they become. So with each generation is more becoming emotionally underdeveloped, they're also becoming more dualistic. So today, it's a huge mess on the reservation. As a whole, we're incredibly underdeveloped emotionally, and we are incredibly dualistic. We're quick to attack each other. We're quick to pull each other down. We're just like the rest of the civilized, dualistic world. Notice I didn't say white man, because this is all over the world. It's not just among white countries. It's all over the world. Wherever there is a dualistic ideology, where one gender is considered less than and property of the other gender, you're going to have incredibly underdeveloped emotional people, which equals incredibly dualistic people. And that is unhealthy. So that started by the time of the late 1800s on the reservation.
To read more about Lakota Star Knowledge spirituality, you can read my book called Wichocha Otechike. You can see the book cover on the right side of this screen. This book contains the information to what I talk about on my Lakota spirituality videos. To purchase this book, please click below where it says Show More. Clicking on that link will open up the description below, and there you will see a link called To Purchase My Books. As you will see, it's an eBay link. Click on that eBay link, and there you will see the information to get this book. Lila Pila Mayelo. Thank you very much.